Hello, Shiver Seekers. Are you ready to follow us into the unknown? I'm Cynthia.
And I'm Stephanie. You have found the Dark Oak.
Today, I'm going to tell you all about the very strange and mysterious disappearance of 23-year-old Duncan McPherson.
Oh, I don't think I've heard of this one. So another young man then.
Another young man, and his disappearance was a little different than some of the other ones we've covered, and definitely a mystery. So I'll be very curious to see what you think happened at the end of this case.
Ooh, okay. Welcome to the Dark Oak Podcast, the mystery podcast with purpose. Here at the Dark Oak, we dive deep every week into mysterious and unsolved cases, complete with real-time gasps and laughs to keep you on the edge of your seat. But what truly sets us apart from other mystery podcasts is our heart. We're committed to turning those eerie stories into real-world hope and positive change. Through our charity, the Branch of Hope Foundation, we donate a portion of our Patreon support and sponsor earnings each month to a meaningful non-profit organization directly related to the first episode of the month. It's our way of honoring the human side of every mystery we explore and building a stronger community together. This month, we are proudly supporting the New York State Crimestoppers. And this episode was introduced to you in the Yolanda Bendix episode. New York State Crimestoppers is a 501c3 nonprofit organization that works as a resource for federal, state, county, and local law enforcement throughout the state of New York. NYS Crimestoppers serves several programs offering rewards of up to $2,500 for information leading to the arrest and conviction of criminals in New York State. If you are interested in finding out more information about this nonprofit organization, you can go to their website at nyscrimestoppers.org to learn more, or you could join us on our Patreon to increase the impact we can make together. We take our title, The Podcast with Purpose, very seriously. It's a constant reminder that even in the darkest tales, we can shine a light on hope, humanity, and community. To learn more about the Branch of Hope Foundation, this month's featured organization, or how to get involved, visit us anytime at thedarkoak.com, follow along on Instagram at the Dark Oak Podcast, or check out our Patreon page. Now let's take this thrilling and meaningful adventure together.
Well, as I mentioned, today I'm going to be telling you the story of Duncan Allen McPherson, who was born on February 3rd, 1966 in Saskatchewan, Canada, to his parents Bob and Linda MacPherson. And Duncan was the oldest of two boys with a younger brother named Derek. So Duncan and Derek. And throughout his life, Duncan was known as a free spirit. He loved being outside. He loved nature. And he loved hockey.
Okay, so hockey is a sport I can't say I've really gotten into. I have gone to some hockey matches, hockey matches. They're called matches, right? Hockey games.
Listen, everything I know about hockey, I learned from watching Heated Rivalry. So I am not the person to ask, but
So you're an expert. Really?
Well,
an expert.
Sure. Some might say that.
But just in general, I mean, in Florida, I guess it's not a huge thing, even though I do have a friend whose kids are on a hockey team here in Florida. It's very expensive here is what I'll say, because there are very few ice rinks around here because they're not made naturally. Let's just say that. But my kids are super into the Mighty Ducks. So everything I know about hockey, I learned from the Mighty Ducks. So also, not an expert. But what I will say is the games, matches, challenges that I have been to have been very fun.
Oh.
It's a very spirited, intense, fun atmosphere.
It absolutely is. And I'm not really a sports girl, I say as I wear my Red Sox hat. I married into the Red Sox. So
it's a cultural phenomenon, really.
Right. I'm not in it for the baseball, I'll tell you that. But hockey is one of those games that I actually really do enjoy. I especially love watching like the fighting and it's very exciting and it is very fun. And I don't know if our team in Orlando is still in existence, but we used to have an ice hockey team. So I don't remember what the name is, but and I don't know if we still exist, but for a while, because I have gone to games.
No, for a while. I don't think the hockey team in Orlando exists anymore, but there is one down in Fort Myers that's been around for quite a long time.
Okay.
That's the one that I've been to. And again, I don't really think they're good, but the games are fun.
So fun.
Viewers. So
fun.
I don't know though. Is the whole like knocking out of teeth thing, is that still a thing though? I mean, I know that was a thing when we were growing up, but now with like safety measures, because that was kind of the joke, is like hockey players like never have teeth.
Right.
Is that still a thing? Or are safety things better now? Do they get to keep their teeth? I don't know.
If you're a hockey fan, chime in and let us know, because again, I'm not the person to ask.
all the people you know that play hockey have teeth. Is that what you're saying?
They absolutely have teeth. Yes. Very nice teeth. Very nice.
Oh, girl.
Yeah. Well, Duncan loved hockey, and Duncan, I believe, had his teeth from all the pictures I've seen.
Okay, good for Duncan.
Yes.
Good.
Yes. He'd been playing hockey since childhood, and he was very good. So early on, he decided to make hockey his career.
Wow. So he must have been pretty good, too.
Right. Duncan played junior hockey for the Saskatoon Blades from 1982 to 1986, recording 119 points in 189 games. And he was selected 20th overall in the first round of the 1984 NHL draft. So pretty good.
Wow. Okay.
Right.
Very cool, Duncan.
His nickname was MacPherson for his fearless, aggressive style. So apparently there was one game where the opposing team had someone called an enforcer or a goon. And apparently this player's role isn't really to score points, it's to fight. That's
okay. Therefore, the no teeth analogy. Yes.
So given Duncan's reputation for being such a good player, this goon on this rival team had placed a target on his back. But another player gave Duncan a heads up saying, hey, as soon as this game starts, this guy's going to come after you. So Duncan was like, okay, no worries. I got this. And as soon as the game started, Duncan went and attacked the goon, and he ended the fight before it even started. So he truly was MacPherson.
Okay. Is that called like a body check or something when they like smash each other? I think that's what that's called.
Again, I don't know. You are asking me too many questions. I know about Duncan, and that's it.
Okay. All right. My apologies. You're my hockey expert right now. You're the only one in the room, Cynthia. That's it. You're the only one I got.
We are in trouble. We are in trouble. Now, unfortunately, as we've alluded to, hockey can be, I guess, violent in a way. So Duncan did suffer some injuries throughout his career, and ultimately those injuries cut his career short. So he was not able to make this his long-term plan.
Boo. So it must have been more than just teeth.
Yes. But he maintained a good attitude about it, saying, quote, down in the minors, you play the best you can. And if you aren't meant to be a superstar, well, there's nothing you can do about it, end quote. So good attitude.
Yeah. Yeah. And it sounds like even though he loved hockey and he wanted to make hockey his career, he didn't put all his eggs in one basket. Like, he sounds like he's more of a well-rounded person. Like, he sees prospects in other areas of his life too.
Sure. And on that note, he had to decide what he was going to do with the rest of his life. So at one point, he considered going to college to study biology. Hiking the Appalachian Trail had always been on his bucket list, just like it's on yours and mine.
Yes.
But he actually did it. He went and he hiked the trail, and he was successful at that. Now, unfortunately, he did come home with Lyme disease. So something for us to investigate before we set out on the AT, but he did recover. He did have one strange interaction leading up to his disappearance. He told his mother, Linda, that he'd been approached by a man claiming to be a recruiter for the CIA. And this man had asked Duncan to join the CIA. So this was back in 1989, and the Cold War was still going on. But hockey players were able to make it past the Iron Curtain. So
Oh, yes. Okay.
an agent posing as a hockey player could be a good cover. Now, the idea may have intrigued Duncan, but he wasn't willing to give up his life and his family to join the CIA, so he did decline the offer.
Still, that's interesting.
It is interesting. And, as so often does in life, another offer came in. 23-year-old Duncan received a call from a businessman named Ron Dixon, and Ron had just bought a hockey team, the Dundee Tigers, which was based out of Scotland. And Ron offered Duncan the position of head coach, which was obviously right up Duncan's alley. It came with a good salary. It sounded like a perfect opportunity.
A coaching job in Scotland? Sold. That sounds amazing.
I will take it.
Yes, as a young person, because he disappeared when he was 23. So this must have been like his early 20s. He's not settled. It doesn't sound like he has a family at this point. I mean, do it. Guys, if this ever comes, if you're in Duncan's situation, you should do it.
Well,
that's amazing.
I will tell you, sadly, it was the acceptance of this job that probably is responsible for Duncan's disappearance. It set it in motion, unfortunately. But in general, yes, accept the job. I mean, this was a great opportunity, but in Duncan's case, it did not work out well. I'm just going to
you really know how to steal a girl. You really know how to steal a girl's thunder here, Cynthia. That's
this is really this is a really, really sad case where right in the middle of everything going right, something just went really, really wrong.
Oh, boo.
Duncan did accept this position, with his start date being mid-August 1989. But being the adventurer that he was, he decided to head to Europe in the beginning of August and spend the first 2 weeks sightseeing. He made plans to visit a friend named George, who agreed to let Duncan use his red Opel hatchback. And with that, Duncan left Canada on August 2nd for this exciting new adventure. So he was going to go to Europe, stay with a couple friends, borrow one of their cars, sightsee, come back in time for his Scotland gig.
That's amazing. Mm-hmm. I know you're alluding to this is going to unravel at the end, but how cool.
So cool. So cool. So cool. So after visiting his friend George and another friend Roger, on August 8th, Duncan drove George's car to Innsbruck, Austria, which is a famous ski town. And being an outdoorsman and an athlete, he decided to do some snowboarding at Stubai Glacier. Now, this was in August, and most slopes at the resort closed in June. But given the fact that there was year-round snow on this particular slope, it was open year-round. Duncan was a beginner snowboarder, so he decided his best course of action was to take a lesson. So on August 9th, he rented snowboarding gear from the on-site Sport Shop 3000 before meeting with the snowboarding instructor named Walter. Duncan had his lesson. The two men enjoyed each other's company, so much so that they ate lunch together during this lesson time. And during Duncan's lesson, his sweater got soaked, which, I imagine probably happens quite regularly with all that snow. So he purchased a new one.
And sweat. Sometimes it gets a little sweaty up there, I can tell you.
And probably especially in August, because even though there is still snow, it's definitely one of the warmer months.
It absolutely is true. I mean, skiing and snowboarding can create quite a bit of sweat.
Okay. So his wet sweater, he decided to leave in Walter's office along with some other gear, just kind of like hanging over furniture to dry out while he went and purchased a new sweater.
Okay.
As you might imagine, given his athleticism, Duncan took to snowboarding pretty naturally.
Oh yeah.
And after his lesson with Walter, he decided he was going to stay on the slopes and do some solo snowboarding. But before the two separated, Duncan told Walter that if the weather was good the next day, he would like to have another lesson. And the two made tentative plans to meet up for that lesson the next day. Now, that evening, when Walter had finished working for the day, He was a little surprised to see that Duncan's sweater and gear was still hanging up in his office. Duncan had never come back to grab those things, but he just figured, okay, Duncan's going to grab them the next day at his lesson.
Sure, I could see that.
Well, Duncan never showed up for that lesson.
And
And
that's unusual.
yes. And Walter was really disappointed because the two had really clicked. They'd gotten along. It was fun. You know, it wasn't work. It was fun. But he tried not to take it personally. When you're on vacation, plans change. We know that. Meanwhile, back in Saskatoon on August 11th, Linda woke up from an awful nightmare. She literally woke up screaming, which woke up Bob. She told him that something terrible had happened to Duncan.
Okay, so that sounds like right up your alley. I don't know if we've ever talked about it on the podcast, but you are prone to kind of premonitions of this type. Is that right? I mean, I don't want to speak for you, but I guess you would relate with this a little bit more. I can't say this is my gift, but you've had a few times where things have kind of come to you, like you felt like you've known something's going to happen.
Yes, and I will say this is a nightmare. I've never woke up screaming saying something horrible happened and then found out literally like something horrible happened, potentially maybe even at that same exact moment. That I've never had anything like that black and white happen, but I have had dreams about somebody or something happening and then it comes to existence, it happens. This would be terrible. This would be awful. And I will tell you, it sounds like, oh, how great to sometimes have an inkling of something that's going to happen before it does. No, it's awful. It's terrible because what happens is when you just have a nightmare, sometimes I'm like, was that a nightmare? Was that a premonition? What was that? Because sometimes you just have nightmares about bad things happening. And so to be like, I remember one time I had a flight and I dreamt that my plane crashed and I had a flight coming up and I was like, okay, is this a sign that I'm not supposed to get on this plane or is this just anxiety working through? I had to really listen to myself and say, okay, what do we think this is? And it turned out it was just anxiety.
I can see how that would be very stress inducing in its own way.
Yeah. Yes. And there's no rhyme and reason. I'm sure it happens to lots of people and I don't know what causes it or why or when or how. And sometimes it happens and sometimes it doesn't. All that to say, Linda, we are going to find out. Linda had some real intuition going on, which is honestly, I can't think of anything as terrible as that. What a terrible thing. What a terrible, terrible feeling she must have been experiencing in this moment.
Well, because just because you know something's terrible is happening. So now she has this knowledge, or she feels she has this knowledge, yet you're powerless to do anything. So what do? You just sit there with this knowledge.
Right.
And you can't do anything.
Right. Now, whenever, being a woman of faith, when I have moments like this, I choose to pray. That's what I choose to do. And I choose to think maybe this was like a warning. So maybe I'm supposed to pray. Yeah. Oh, other than praying, you're pretty powerless, quite frankly.
Yeah.
Well, sadly, almost confirming her fears, the next day, Linda was expecting to receive a call from Duncan saying that he'd made it to Scotland and was getting settled. But that call never came. And, we're talking about this feeling of helplessness. This was before cell phones. This was before texting. Right. This was 1989. Right. So all they know is that he's in another country. He's not calling. She has this horrible premonition. They have a vague idea of where he was, and they know he's not where he's supposed to be. I mean, imagine the helplessness they must have felt.
Yeah, because there's no reporting him as a missing person. I mean, you can attempt it, but who do you report it to? What do you tell them? Where do you tell them to even begin looking?
Right.
There's not much you can do except wait, right?
Right. And so that's what they did for a couple of days until on August 16th, a hockey buddy called Linda asking if she'd heard from Duncan because he'd never made it to the new job in Scotland.
Okay. Yeah. So that's when the alarm bells really start going off.
Right. So Linda contacted the Royal Canadian Mounted Police to report Duncan missing, but it was the weekend and they told her they didn't handle missing person cases on the weekend and she would have to call back on Monday during regular business hours.
RMCP do better.
Yeah, I just
No, I don't know. In this situation, though, is that wrong of them to say? Because he is an adult man, and they've already waited a few days. So I don't know. I'm not going to be too harsh on them. Maybe just because of the circumstances, they told her this would be more of like, I don't want to say a run-of-the-mill disappearance, but you know what I'm saying? It's not like a kid's just been kidnapped off the street. Maybe that would have elicited a different response.
Yes and no. And I've talked to my husband about this before because I think after covering one of our cases where the police were like, I'm sure they'll show up. I went to my husband, who's a law enforcement officer, and I was like, up in arms. How could authorities tell a parent to just, get some sleep? I'm sure they'll show up. And his response was, honey, most of the missing persons reports we get, they show up within 24 or 48 hours. Most of the time it is just a miscommunication. So that's why they're telling them that, is because most of the time these people do show up. So that's it from that perspective. But I'm a big believer that we know our people. So there are some people who might go to Europe and say, I'll give you a call. And 2 weeks goes by and everything is perfectly fine. And they haven't called you because they're just being themselves and they're not that kind of a person, right? They're not the kind of person who's going to check in, they're a free spirit, etc. That might be Stephanie. Then you have people like me who I'm going to say, if you don't hear from me on this date, call the RCMP because something's wrong.
Yeah.
And I'm going to make sure you hear from me by that date. And if you don't, something's wrong. So I think you have to know your people.
I think all of that is very fair and very valid.
Right. In this case, they knew Duncan, and they knew Duncan wasn't going to blow off this brand new job he was so excited about.
Well, and I think that's the distinction for me in this case. Running around sightseeing, one thing, but not showing up for a responsibility, that's something else.
Right. Now, when they were finally able to file a missing persons report, the MacPhersons were told that an Interpol bulletin was going to be sent out to all the border crossings and police stations throughout Europe. And if Duncan tried to cross any borders or checked in at any airports or was arrested, they would be notified.
Now, at this point, his parents aren't even aware of these snowboarding lessons, right?
No,
like they're not even aware of these interactions. Wow. No. Okay. Okay.
Because again, nowadays you'd be like, hey, I stopped at this Dubai resort. I'm taking snowboarding lessons via text. But these were like loose plans that he had. And he just saw a glacier and was like, I'm going to go snowboarding. And he wasn't meant to check in at all until he got to Scotland. So it is a different way of communicating than we have today. A week went by with no sign of Duncan. So on August 23rd, the MacPhersons flew to Europe with 2,000 missing persons flyers that they took with them. And they began a 3-week-long search on the ground for Duncan. They themselves were out looking for their son.
You know what this reminds me of is the case that my husband Martin and I actually covered when you were taking some time away about David Snedden. His circumstances were different, but similar in the fact that he was around the same age. He was a Mormon missionary. So in the Church of Latter-day Saints, before you graduate out, you're expected as a young person to take an international missionary trip. And he had decided to go to China. So he was taking some classes there. He was doing mission work. And before he decided to return to the States, he decided to do this hike around China, and then he disappeared. So his family flew over and did their own work for weeks, passing out flyers, talking to people. And that's when we actually figured out the Chinese government may have been actually covering up some details of his disappearance. But his family was the one that were able to actually uncover that. So if this case is at all interesting to you, go and listen to the David Snedden case. We actually think he may still be alive. We believe he might have been abducted by North Korea. Do you remember that whole thing? Like he may be living in North Korea right now as a captive. So it's a two-parter. But it reminds me so much. Again, I said, oh, interesting. Another young male, because I feel like this 20 to 25-year-old male age range, we hear a lot of missing persons cases, and a lot of them are very intelligent, very accomplished young men that are going out to do something, and then something happens, like something mysteriously happens to them. So it's just so unfortunate because it's just such an amazing time in their lives when they're becoming, right, you know, whatever it is that life has for them. So interesting. But I'm hearing shades of that.
I will have to go back and listen to that two-parter. Obviously, I listened to it when it came out, but I was right in the middle of family stuff and grief and all of that. I do remember some of that, but I'm going to go back and listen to the David Sneddon case as well.
You should. It's a fascinating case.
As you can imagine, this was like looking for a needle in a haystack. His family had a loose idea of where Duncan had been, but his plans had been very fluid. Linda and Bob started by going to police stations to see if anyone had reported anything. But not only had the Nuremberg police not recognized Duncan, because that station had never received the bulletin from Interpol, but the officer also told Bob and Linda that Duncan had probably just met a beautiful woman and was out having the time of his life. Now,
okay.
Bob and Linda knew this wasn't the case. Duncan actually was very much in love with his girlfriend, Tara. And on top of that, he had not used his passport. He hadn't cashed any traveler's checks since August 7th. So to that, the police officer said, well, the woman must be rich.
Oh, that's reaching. You are reaching, sir.
I mean, if we weren't talking about a missing human being, I would love the positive outlook. Oh, he's met a beautiful woman. He's having the time of his life and she's footing the bill. What a great world.
A rich, beautiful, loose woman. I mean,
I love the idea of that. But we're talking about a human being who's missing. So I'd say maybe a little more reverence given to the situation, perhaps.
Well, and also, just like you said, this police officer doesn't know Duncan at all. So he's making judgment calls about his personality without even knowing him. Meanwhile, the people that know him very intimately are saying this is out of character.
Right.
And he's just making up this persona for him.
Right.
It's very uncool.
Right. Right. So the MacPhersons went to the Happy Holidays travel agency. Now, this was the last location that Duncan had used a traveler's check. Now, this agent remembered Duncan and confirmed that he had secured an August 12th flight to Glasgow. He had arranged to come back to the agency to pick up this ticket on August 11th, but he never showed up.
Also, going to pick up your ticket.
I know, 1989. 1989.
Woo! Okay.
Mm-hmm. Bob and Linda went to Duncan's friend Roger's house where he'd stayed that night. So after leaving this travel agency, he went back to Roger's house, stayed the night. But all Roger knew was that Duncan had loose plans to travel. He had talked about perhaps traveling to Italy, but nothing was definite. The only solid information he had was that Duncan had left his home on the 8th and was traveling towards Austria.
Okay.
But the MacPhersons, they're smart people. And they knew that Duncan had arranged to pick up his plane ticket on the 11th back in Nuremberg. So they were able to determine a radius of sorts as to where he could have traveled and still made it back on the 11th in time. So at least they have that. It's not much, but it's something.
It's a data point.
It is. So the family did the only thing they knew to do, and they rented a car and began heading south, stopping at Innsbruck for the night.
Wow.
Okay. Now, Innsbruck is where the Stubai Glacier is, where Duncan took the snowboarding lesson, but they don't know that, right? They don't know that yet.
Oh, Linda. Linda's got something. She's got a spidey sense.
Get this. So they have no idea. They're just stopping here. The next morning, when they woke up, Linda looked out and saw these Austrian Alps and said, Duncan was here. This is where Duncan stopped. Duncan stopped here and spent the night.
It's like a movie.
I know. She knows her son. I mean, I just love that. She was like, Duncan would have stopped here. Duncan would have absolutely stayed the night here. I just love that. I love that she knows him.
Yes, she does. She really, really does.
Right, right. Now, at this point, Linda's major concern was that Duncan had maybe been driving around the area, exploring, and maybe gotten into an accident and the car had become concealed. I don't know how much of the area was like covered in snow. Obviously, we know the slopes were, but there were wooded areas. There's other areas. So she was just worried that maybe he'd been in an accident and nobody had realized.
Sure. And especially at that time, it was not common to wear any kind of head protection.
Mm.
when you were out skateboarding or skiing. It's very typical now. Everyone wears helmets. If you don't wear helmets, you're sticking, like you could stick out like a sore thumb. But even in the 90s, I took trips to Colorado as a kid. No one wore helmets.
Okay.
Everyone wore these crazy hats. But then safety caught up and
Mm-hmm.
said, people die from head
Mm-hmm.
injuries all the time and
Mm-hmm.
ski injuries. So at this time, I could see if you accidentally have an accident and like slide into a tree, even though Duncan is very athletic, accidents absolutely happen regularly
Oh,
when
sure.
you're skiing, and a lot of head injuries were very common. Or even if you broke a leg or something, if somebody's not looking for you, you could be out on that mountain.
Right. Right. And she wasn't even sure that he went up on the mountain. She was more worried about him driving and finding himself in trouble. But
Oh, yeah.
but but I think you bring up a good point. There are lots of things that could have happened in a ski town where nobody knows you are and nobody's looking for you and nobody's
Yeah.
expecting you back. There are lots of ways you could find yourself in trouble.
Dangerous. Yeah.
So the family's first stop was at the Innsbruck police station. And once again, the authorities had never heard of Duncan. So that Interpol bulletin was either never sent out or it wasn't sent out to the appropriate agencies because none of the agencies in the area had seen it.
None of the agencies most likely to have seen Duncan knew about Duncan.
Right. Exactly. They did not.
So frustrating.
So frustrating. But once again, Innsbruck police told Duncan's parents not to worry because nothing bad happens in Austria. They have a very low crime rate.
But accidents happen too.
Well, they said besides, Duncan was a strong man who was very capable of taking care of himself. And once again, yeah, that might be true, but people still get injured. They just
Don't worry. He's a very young, athletic, capable man who's probably with a beautiful, rich woman. Don't worry.
He is living the dream. They dismissed Linda's concerns of a car wreck, saying that if Duncan had been involved in a crash, the vehicle would have absolutely been reported because hikers were very prevalent in this area. And because of the location and the elements, an abandoned vehicle was taken very seriously, presumably, allegedly, because it could signal that someone had perhaps gotten injured or lost somewhere near this giant glacier and they might be in trouble. And since no abandoned vehicles had been found, no worries, he wasn't involved in an automobile accident.
I mean, that may or may not have been true, but what's to say he wasn't out hiking? Okay, so fine, cross that one off the list. But what about the other myriad of things that could have been happening?
Right. The Innsbruck police assured the MacPhersons that a report would be sent to all of the surrounding law enforcement agencies and that they would be on the lookout for Duncan.
Well, based on how great the Interpol message went over, I can see how that put their minds right at ease.
Yeah, right. We haven't heard this before. So with that, the MacPhersons continued their own search. When they arrived to the Italian border, the Border Patrol had never heard of Duncan and therefore had not been on the lookout for his vehicle. And it was the same story at the Switzerland border. No one was aware of Duncan and no one was looking for Duncan. So he may have crossed over the border and they would have never have known. Linda called the RCMP and once again, they promised to send this bulletin out immediately. And for days after this conversation, the MacPhersons still drove around and were met with authorities who'd never heard of their son. So there was just no urgency whatsoever.
What's the deal? And I would think looking out for the vehicle is important too, because what if it turns out someone else is driving that vehicle? I think that would be a pretty critical piece of information, right?
Sure, absolutely. I mean, we will learn a lot if we can find this vehicle. There's a lot to be learned.
Yes.
The MacPhersons continued to travel through Switzerland, literally getting out of their vehicle and looking in wooded areas and ditches. They were desperate. But no matter where they looked, there was no sign of Duncan. So eventually on September 14th, so going on a month since he's been missing, they drove back to Innsbruck. Once again, they reached out to the police, and this time they spoke to an officer who still had not heard of Duncan. Linda asked if they could check all of the hotel registers in Innsbruck to see if Duncan had been a guest, but they were told that it would take an army to do that much work, and that Duncan had a right to privacy, which I kind of understand. I understand the right to privacy, maybe, although he's been missing for nearly a month. So there's that, but it's just too much work. And here's the thing. It probably was a lot of work, but again, human being, It was obvious at this point that Linda and Bob were going to be leading the charge in the search for their son probably forever.
And we see that a lot.
We do.
We see that a lot in these cases, which is why we try to sponsor these organizations that aid families in finding their loved ones. That's so important.
It is. It is. Now, thankfully, they were able to convince the Innsbruck Hockey Club to get involved in the search, and the head coach was able to arrange for an ad slot to air on the evening news on September 20th.
Okay.
And a contractor who'd been working on the parking lot near the Stubai ski resort was watching the news this night and saw this piece on Duncan missing. And he recognized the car that Duncan had been reported to have been driving, the bright red Opel hatchback, because it was the same car that had been sitting in the parking lot by the gondola at Stubai ski resort for 6 weeks.
I'm sorry. I'm going to take a moment. What?
Yes.
What? So, supposedly, this international post is being made about this missing person driving this car, and police hadn't, noticed? What?
Employees hadn't noticed. Guests hadn't noticed. And again, we're already being told that abandoned vehicles raise red flags because of what that could infer. But yet here's an abandoned vehicle. And this wasn't on the outskirts of the parking lot. This was very much a good parking spot. This was a prime parking spot. People are walking back and forth. Nope.
What?
Yeah. So police were able to gain entry into the car via a partially open window. Duncan's passport, watch, and traveler's checks were in the glove box. In the back seat were Duncan's skates, backpack, a sealed letter written to Tara that had been written on August 7th, and it was ready to be mailed out. And this letter was inviting Tara to come join him in Scotland on the 19th, and also confirmed his plans to arrive in Scotland on the 12th. So it doesn't look like he intentionally was disappearing. Also in the back seat was a cassette tape and a bag of rotten fruit. Again, not something you would leave in the car for a long period of time if you plan on coming back, like rotten fruit. So obviously, when you're looking for a needle in a haystack, finding the car is a good thing, but finding the car in this condition is ominous.
So authorities have been blowing off this case for a month now, right? We're still at the month mark.
6 weeks now.
6 weeks. So authorities have been blowing off this case for 6 weeks. And then you find a car with all of Duncan's belongings, everything he would need to escape, to start over, to run away. What is your excuse now?
Right.
What is your excuse? Where is this missing man now?
Right. And to that, I don't really know what the answer was. I have seen an interview. I didn't have it in my script because I didn't know this man's position, if he was a spokesperson for the enforcement or for the law enforcement, or if he was a member of the law enforcement. But he pretty much was responding to Linda being like, how is it that a family who lives in another country who doesn't speak the language is able to find this, but the local law enforcement can't find anything? And the response was literally well, the family has the time and we really don't. We have a bunch of missing persons cases and we don't have the time to pour into each of them, but the family does, which is kind of true. It is true to an extent. Nobody's going to care like the family, right? Right?
Sure,
because they're not going to sleep. They're just never going to stop. And I will tell you, they don't. The MacPherson family has never stopped looking for answers, ever.
But I feel like authorities could have done more. I get it. You may not have found it, but at least you could act like you're a team.
Right.
Right now, it's not even a team. What have you done?
Right.
What have you done? You weren't able to find this, but show me what you have done.
Right.
Have you even let other agencies know
No.
he's missing? Have you called any resorts? Have you called anybody?
Right.
What have you done? So I guess if that statement was coming on the heels of them having done something, that's one thing. But to have them do, for all intent and purpose, nothing,
Right.
that's hard to say, well, they have more time because
Right.
you've done nothing.
So obviously, when they find his car in this parking lot near this resort, the MacPhersons said, hey, we're going to reserve a room at this hostel at the base of this glacier.
Yeah. As a mom, I would have said, I'm never leaving.
Right.
This is where I live now.
Right.
This is my new home.
Exactly. And that's when something amazing happened. So Walter, the man who had given Duncan his snowboarding lesson, just happened to pass by the MacPherson's car in the parking lot, and he recognized Duncan's picture on the missing persons poster that they had posted in the window of their car.
Oh, the thing, the picture the authorities should have been circulating this whole time?
Exactly.
Oh, that one? Oh, okay.
But what are the odds that he's just getting ready to go in for the day and he recognizes this guy?
Well, better odds now that they're at least at a place where we know Duncan was.
Right.
So better. But, you know, considering the scope was originally all of Europe when they first started, the fact that through their own blood, sweat, and tears, and I'm sure that literally was the case, they've been able to slowly narrow this down over the course of 6-7 weeks to be able to get to someone who may have answers. To your point, I think it demonstrates their perseverance.
Sure.
In this case. And again, knowledge of their son, knowledge of his behavior, knowledge of his decision making. You know, I think you said that. I think they're very clever. I think they're very clever people.
Right. And I do find it so interesting that it was literally through the actions of the family, not through the actions of the law enforcement, that Walter, who actually knows a thing or two about Duncan's whereabouts on the last day that anybody ever heard from him, became aware that he was even missing.
And I'm not going to completely come down on law enforcement, except for the fact that they did nothing to lead them to that point.
Right.
They never would have found Walter. If it was up to law enforcement, they never would have found him.
Right. So when Walter sees this poster, he says, okay, I got to go into this hostel. I got to find these people looking for their son. So he did that. He was able to recognize Bob and Linda. You know, they're not from the country. They don't speak the language. And he was able to tell them about that interaction that he had with Duncan nearly 2 months prior. He told them he'd met Duncan at 10 a.m. at the snowboarding school. Now, before meeting Walter, Duncan had rented his gear for the lesson, but the gear rental was included in the price of the snowboarding lesson. He didn't know that. So Walter suggested, hey, let's go back to the shop and try to get you the difference refunded so you don't pay for it twice, really. And the shop refused. So Walter, being the kind of guy he is, he lowered the cost of the private lesson to make up the difference for what Duncan had paid for the gear rental. So this is helpful in a couple ways. One, it made this interaction really stand out. And we know it already stood out because the two got along. They had fun together. But, you know, the fact that he was able to give this information to this family was, I mean, so helpful.
Oh my gosh. I can only imagine, and I mean this genuinely, I'm not using it as a figure of speech, but I can only imagine the feelings that Duncan's family was having at that moment. Finally saying yes, something, like a nugget of hope, something, someone has seen him.
Right.
And also, no wonder Duncan liked Walter. What an awesome dude, like a total random snowboard lesson giver, snowboard teacher. And he winds up being like this totally stand-up, really cool guy.
Right.
That is, I'm sure, now very invested in helping to find Duncan.
Right.
Wow.
He told the MacPhersons about Duncan leaving his sweater behind in his office. And that sweater had sat there for weeks, obviously, until eventually Walter took it home and was like, I'm just going to hold this at home. And if this guy ever shows back up again, I'm going to give him his stuff back.
If I was Duncan's mom and I saw that sweater, I think my knees would just hit the ground. Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Walter told them that his girlfriend, so Walter's girlfriend, did see Duncan riding the tow lift alone around 2:30 that day after Walter and Duncan finished their lesson and while Walter was giving lessons to other guests. But no one that they know of had seen Duncan come off of the slopes. And that was all Walter knew. That was all the
Okay.
information he was able to give. But it was
Okay.
something, right? And it was a lot more than they had previously.
Yes. And I imagine they also felt like they had an ally at this point.
Sure.
I imagine they felt very alone.
Sure.
At least I would have.
Oh, absolutely. So knowing that Duncan was last seen on this ski slope, the next morning, a volunteer search team decided to go over the slopes. The area was searched, but there was no sign of Duncan.
Notice volunteer searchers, not an organized investigative search,
Right.
if you will.
And I don't know exactly what that consisted of. I do know they had rappelling searchers and stuff like that. Again, this is in the Alps, so these are like big
But
mountains.
Also, if this comes together where he disappeared on the last day he was seen, he's been up on that mountain for like 2 months.
Yeah. Yep.
He's probably not just laying out in the open anywhere.
Okay. No, you're right. You're right. Now, sadly, the search was called off on September 26th because there was heavy snowfall and it was a danger to continue to search the area.
And probably it's going to make his body more difficult to find. There are no tracks. There are no evidence that someone has maybe had an accident. Like, you can't see anything.
Right. Right.
Oh, I'm getting so frustrated. Like, all that missing time.
Well, get this. Again, I am so impressed with Bob and Linda. I'm so impressed. But it was after the search was called off and it felt like there was nothing else that they could do that Linda suddenly had a realization that no one else seemed to have had. No one had checked to see if Duncan had returned his rented gear to the ski shop. And that would tell us something.
Oh,
if he'd returned it, it would have implied that he'd made it off of the slope, right?
Linda, get it.
I know. And if he hadn't returned it, it would imply that maybe something had gone wrong while he was
obviously
on the slope.
Yes.
So Linda and Bob went to the shop to review the records. Now, they were told that those records had already been disposed of, which is not probably out of the ordinary. It's been a couple months, and these are just rental records. These aren't like super important documents, unless, of course, somebody goes missing.
Sure.
But the man behind the counter did tell them that they were not missing any rental gear, which would imply that Duncan had returned his gear.
Shoot. It's a nice data point, but also, oh my gosh, now it raises more questions, right? Where did he go after he turned in the gear?
It opens up all the possibilities once again.
Shoot.
So now the question is, okay, if he made it off the slopes, where is he?
Yeah, just like when you feel like you're making headway, then something happens that changes everything.
Right, right. Now, the official search for Duncan was called off in October of 1989, and Bob and Linda had to make the long trip back to Canada, not knowing what happened to their son, but they did make a promise to each other that they were going to return when the weather warmed up and the snow began to melt, because if for some reason he was on that mountain or in another area, lost or injured, he would be easier to find once the snow started to melt. And at this point, they did assume that Duncan had probably died, potentially on the slopes, potentially somewhere else. But obviously, there was no way to know for sure or have any real closure until they had his body. The MacPhersons spent the next 14 years looking for their son. This cost them their savings, their retirement. I mean, really, this search for their son became their main mission in life.
Wow.
And then on July 18th, 2003, so he went missing in 1989.
Yeah.
2003. During a period of unusually heavy summer melt, a resort employee was grooming snow on the Stubai Glacier when he noticed something odd. A red glove sticking out of the melting ice. And when he pulled on it, he realized that a hand was still attached.
Oh, that's so grim. What a grim description that is.
And this is where I'm going to leave you for part 1 of the disappearance of Duncan McPherson.
No, Cynthia.
And
I didn't even get a warning. I didn't even get a warning.
I know. And I will tell you that finding his body on the slopes does not answer all the questions.
Oh, so it was not like a clear-cut accident.
We will talk about that in part 2.
Oh, it really is a cliffhanger. Oh,
It
shoot.
is. Okay. This would be a 2.5 hour long episode if we kept going. So we have no choice.
But I'm totally invested in what happened to Duncan now.
I know.
And Linda.
I know.
Linda, if you're listening, I want you to be part of the Dark Oak podcast. I want you to come and use your intuition to help solve some cases. Because I feel like Linda, she's got a gift.
She does have a gift, but she's a mother. 2 weeks ago, I think we talked about how far a father's love can go.
And Louis Zaharias.
Right.
Missing his children.
Here we have a mother and a father really doing everything they can to find their son. And yeah, what else are you going to do? So come back next week.
All right. Come back next week, guys. We're going to tag on some afterthoughts where basically all I'm going to do is ream out Cynthia for leaving me with a cliffhanger. So you can hear that. If you're going to enjoy that, me, laying it on Cynthia thick for leaving us hanging, come on, join us over at our Patreon page.
I can take it. I can take it.
All right, guys, come back next week. Figure out what happened to Duncan, or help us figure out what happened to Duncan. Okay. All right. Thanks a lot, Shiver Seekers. See you next week.
Bye.
This episode of The Dark Oak was created, researched, written, recorded, hosted, edited, published, and marketed by Cynthia and Stephanie of Just Us Gals Productions, and made possible by you, our shiver-seeking listener. Special thanks goes to Justice Himes for our incredible artwork and Ryan Crete for our amazing music.